Hello, my name is Professor Scott Erickson, and I teach saxophone at Murray State University. And I'll be making a few videos to help you get started with playing the saxophone. That's the instrument I started on when I was a young kid. And the first thing I want to mention is that you always want to be playing the saxophone with a neck strap. And the neck strap should be included in your instrument. You don't want to be physically just holding the instrument up by yourself without the help of a neck strap. The instrument's pretty heavy, and the neck strap will take a lot of the weight off. I put it over around my neck, and at first, the pulling and tugging is a little uncomfortable, but you'll get used to it. And often it'll feel better if you're wearing a shirt or a top that has a collar. The neck strap is adjustable, and there's a little part of the neck strap that almost looks like a little buckle that I can pull up or pull down, depending on whether I want to get the instrument closer to me or a little farther away from me. The body of the instrument. This is the largest part of the saxophone. And even when I grab a hold of it, I want to be careful not to grab it in a spot where there's a lot of keys sticking out. So I don't want to grab it here, for example. This tends to be a pretty good spot where I feel like I can hold the instrument comfortably and I don't feel like I'm going to bend any keys. When Adolph Sax invented the saxophone, he invented a family of instruments, several of them. And this is the alto, the most commonly played one. A few of the saxes, most of them are actually larger than this, and there's a couple that are smaller. Now I'm going to put the neck on top of the body of the instrument. And there's a little screw here that I can tighten or loosen that I'm going to loosen when I put the neck in this opening. And when I put the neck on, I'm just going to jiggle it back and forth until I see that it's in all the way. And then I'm going to tighten the screw fairly tight just to make sure it's snug and in place. And then I'm going to try to center it, the bell and the neck, with the body of the instrument. I'm going to set the saxophone on my lap, and you might actually want to set it in the case, on top of your case, either closed or open, because the next step is to assemble the mouthpiece. Mouthpieces are made of what we say hard rubber, and you need to know right away they're breakable. If you drop one on a hard surface, there's a very good chance they're going to chip. And just a little chip out of the tip, and that's usually where that will happen, is going to make really the instrument not playable or the mouthpiece not usable anymore. So you always want to be very, very careful. If you drop it on carpet, there's a greater chance it won't happen, but still, just whatever you do, avoid ever dropping it. So you always have to be super careful. Otherwise, you'll have to replace it. I cannot play the saxophone without a reed. And the saxophone, like the clarinet, is called a single reed instrument. And this part of the reed is the absolute thinnest. So I want to avoid ever touching it, because even my finger just touching it can cause an imperfection. Or you could say, or I could chip it, use the term to chip the reed, or have something that takes away from that really smooth and thin part of the reed. So I want to make sure that I just don't touch it. I want to always hold it with this part of the reed, and I can't play it until I get the reed wet. And so most of the time, clarinet and saxophone players will just soak it in their mouth. They'll set the reed on their tongue. It's also possible to just submerge it in some water, but sometimes we don't have that with us. And at this point, you might find that the taste is a little bit strange. You'll get used to it. I'm going to now place the reed on the mouthpiece. And it's, I'm trying to do this in a way that you can see. I want to make sure everything is always symmetrical or even on top and bottom. And this metal piece that holds the reed onto the mouthpiece is called a ligature. And my ligature might be a little bit different than what you have. There's all different types of ligatures and various prices. And a lot of times people, after they play a long time, want to get something that's more what professionals might use. So my particular ligature has the screws on the top, but I'm sure yours will have the screws on the bottom. And either way, it serves the same purpose of holding the reed onto the mouthpiece. So I'll show you this in a minute, but I'm centering the reed on the top and on the bottom, and I'm trying to have equal amount of space. And I'm adjusting the reed at a height where when I look at it, I just see a super thin line of black from the mouthpiece, as thin a line as you can see. And once it's in place, I tighten the screws pretty snugly. So what I mean a thin line of black is just that I can just barely see on the top of the reed, just a super thin line of black from the mouthpiece. I don't want the reed to be sticking above the mouthpiece. You can see how I've centered it on the top and I've centered it on the bottom of the reed. I don't want the reed to be going that direction or that direction. I will purposely position this in a not very good way. So you can see it goes off to the side. There's too much space on the top of between the top of the reed and the top of the mouthpiece. And just those subtle changes, and actually they're pretty big changes, will cause or will affect the way it speaks a lot. So take it very seriously that you center it exactly like I described. If it's not, the reed won't respond the same way and sound the same way. So I'm going to reposition it again. This could take a long time to get the hang of. So if you feel like you're struggling with it and you just can't get it right, it just takes some time. Once I have the reed on the mouthpiece, I'm going to put the mouthpiece on the neck. And you can see this piece of cork on the end of the neck. When I put the mouthpiece on, just like when I put the neck on the body of the instrument, I'm just going to kind of jiggle it back and forth as I slide it down the mouthpiece. Now, there's not a magic place that it goes. Saxophonists put the amount they put on the mouthpiece or how far they slide it down is really what will make it play the most in tune. And you'll discover down the road that if your sound is too low, or we say you're flat, you'll put the mouthpiece in a little bit farther. You'll find that if your pitch is too high, and a tuner can show you whether you're playing sharp or flat. But if I'm sharp or my pitch is too high, I'm going to pull the mouthpiece out. Now, my mouthpiece went on the cork quite easily, but you may not find that's always the case. And it's not always the case with me. I'm going to take my mouthpiece off. Sometimes this cork doesn't want to cooperate. And sometimes it's too big. And so the mouthpiece doesn't want to fit on there very tight, very well, and it's very difficult to move. So this little tube is something called Cork Grease. It almost looks like, it's kind of similar to chapstick, except you don't want to put it on your lips. It's for the cork on the instrument. And Cork Grease might also be in a little round container too. But I put a little of Cork Grease on, almost like I'm putting chapstick on. I just put some on. I don't want to glob a bunch on, but I want to put it on and then just rub it on the cork all over. And I might have to do that every so often. With a new instrument, you might have to put Cork Grease on every single day. But once I put the cork grease on, I can maneuver this mouthpiece a lot easier. You want to make sure the mouthpiece goes on and off and that you can adjust it easily without feeling like the reed's going to fall off and the ligature is going to fall off. If you find that that's happening, you need to put some cork grease on, or you may not be tightening the screws on the ligature enough. I have the mouthpiece on, I have the neck on the body of the instrument, and I have a spot where I can hook the neck strap on to the body of the instrument. So now I'm all ready to play. In our next video, we'll go through another step in learning how to play the saxophone.